I don't know is Matt? Oh, there he is over here. Okay, we're going to call a meeting back to order, and we're going to begin on the action items. And the first item is number 17, adoption of the 3 resolutions related to the Plan B final report. And I'm going to turn that over to General Manager Kevin Kelly.
Yes, President Menville, members of the board, the 3 resolutions are in essentially the form that they were received, except for the final one having to do with committees. The specific action requested is that you establish 5 committees. The makeup of those committees, as it was originally submitted, would have had the general manager as a standing member of each committee, and representatives from Mr. DeMar's law firm also staffing the committee. In consultation with Mr. DeMar's, I've made changes there where, in place of the general manager, the appropriate designated manager from the most appropriate area within the district would be a member of the committee, as would designated staff. And my thinking there is that Mr. DeMar's and the general manager's office will end up providing some oversight of all 5 committees.
Okay, let me get this clear. When you say appropriate staff, is that staff IID staff or DeMar's staff? So
my thinking there is that, for instance, the QSA Readiness Committee, Mr. Silva would be a member of that group, and he would designate someone from the Water Department to assist.
Okay.
And that's 5 standalone committees?
And it is, and it's possible as we implement these committees that that they could be combined, and you might end up with a lesser number than 5.
And these committees will be advisory committees? They
will be, and the board would have a member on each of them.
And those committee meetings can for convenience be scheduled back to back. So if the same staff and same board member was on those,
they could be to facilitate greater participation.
So these committees then could recommend professional services to assist them?
Yes, contingent on your vote.
Okay, then when we vote on these, and if they all pass, and when the directors can decide among themselves who they want to serve on the committees.
I think that we would defer to your board to name.
That's fine.
Hey, wait a minute. Going back to something that Director Hanks just said, these committees could vote to hire outside consultants to help them with the committee. Is that what you said, Director Hanks? What?
I just, if there was some type of advice they needed or services that committee needed, that they could ask for or receive it, not be excluded.
It could be that they might need some outside help, and my response was that would be contingent on your board's approval.
Yeah, I mean, my legal advice would be, if the committee needs something, it should be something that the board takes action to give them. You don't want these committees to represent IID and actually be able to take action on their own, retain people. I think you're pushing a Brown Act responsibilities at that point.
As just one example that stands out for me, there is a committee that's in charge of communications, and one of its tasks, one of its identified charges, is to develop something like a coherent message and to disseminate it through a public relations campaign. I don't think that the IID board at this juncture right now, with the conditions that we're facing, could settle on a coherent message right now. I think that you can, and that you're moving toward one. But I would probably want to see more time pass and for the situation to ripen a little bit.
I'll make a motion that we accept the resolution on accepting the final report.
Okay, that's the first one, which is number A. So is there a second to that?
Same time.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Is there any discussion on number A, accepting the final report?
Yeah,
But
well,
let me-
no, there is, except that on that report, he talks about irrigators. What does he mean by irrigators?
That's the guys that are using the water.
Yeah, what he means is water users, not Zanjeros.
Well, couldn't he say something like, we use here in the valley, water users?
You know,
or-
he actually was asked about that. I think it's a term of art in New Mexico.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's what happens when you get someone from the outside.
Wow.
Okay, and wait a moment. What we have a motion and a second on is the first one, which is a critical path forward. And is there anybody from the public that wants to make any comments before we take a vote on this? Seeing none, please vote. All right, thank you. Move on to number B, which is adopting several guideline principles. Is there a motion for that?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the guidance.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, is there any discussion by the board? Any discussion by the public? Okay, please vote. Thank you. And we'll move on to the last one, which is establishing the 5 committees. And I think General Manager Kevin Kelly explained that, so is there a motion for this one?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it. I would ask that somewhere we, for the discussion, whatever, that the committees are to be made up of executive department managers. We were talking about appropriate designated staff, local stakeholders, and board members. Then, upon board approval, then use of professional services.
Add that to your motion.
Add that language. You're comfortable with the language, or do you want to give that to him?
However legal is done.
Okay, any comments from board members?
Well, I thought that if you wanted professionals, a consultant to help with the members, with the committee, you should come back to the board, the full board for approval.
I think that's part of the motion.
Is that what,
That's what,
restate that again, please, so I understand it?
Committees to be made up of executive department managers, appropriate designated staff, local stakeholders, and board members with the ability to use recommended professional service as approved by the board.
Okay.
okay, that was part of Director Desert's motion, seconded by Director Hanks. So are there any public comments? Please vote. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number 18, which is internal auditing, general matters. And Betty, you're going to handle that?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the board. I don't have any emerging issues in the section to report unless you have any questions for me.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Betty? Okay, Betty, thank you. Move on to item number 19, review and acknowledgement of motor fuel inventory audit. And Craig, you're going to handle that.
Go fast.
Good afternoon. We audited the motor fuel inventory and made some certain recommendations, which we will go over. The motor fuel inventory at the district consists of 3 different materials: unleaded gasoline, number 2 diesel, and motor fuel. These materials are stored at 7 different locations in 2 lube trucks. The recommendations. Number 1, adopt a written process which establishes a tolerable variance for analysis of differences noted while comparing the volume of motor fuel and bulk motor oil reported as inventory in SAP to the volume of motor fuel and bulk motor fuel reported as in-tank inventory. Let me state now that the Fleet Service is doing a good job of managing the inventory, the motor fuel and the bulk motor oil. But they do make adjustments as needed, more on a subjective basis, to these inventories, trying to reconcile what is recorded in SAP to what is actually recorded by the other various software as actually in tank. And we believe there should be a written process with a tolerable variance and a duration which we recommend is at least quarterly. All responsible parties are in agreement with this recommendation. Number 2, change the SAP Drop 4 storage locations SAP business area from water to power. Right now, all the fuel inventories for these 3 items throughout the district, the 7 locations and the 2 lube trucks, are the inventory and the purchased by the water department, with the exception of La Quinta. We believe that the inventory at Drop 4, since it is at an energy department operating location, should be changed to be have the business area changed from water to power. SAP still says power. That's why we say power. All responsible parties have accepted this, but there is some further evaluation necessary because of configuration changes, master data changes, and adequate testing. The 3rd recommendation, reclassify all motor fuel and bulk motor oil inventories into SAP Auto Fleet and Maintenance Plant, except for the bulk motor oil in La Quinta, while maintaining the SAP Power Business Area already assigned to the fuel physically located in La Quinta. This was also accepted by all responsible parties, but it will take more configuration changes, master data changes, and testing. So with both of these recommendations, there's some studies and there's some investigation that has to be done by the IT department. They support that effort. And if these recommendations are adopted by you, they will move forward on that and work with us. We will monitor their progress on that. Number 4, correct or eliminate the 1,500 gallons of unleaded gasoline currently reported as in transit in SAP Auto Fleet and Maintenance. This has again been accepted by all parties. And in fact, this 1,500 gallons has been recorded as in transit since August 2001.
Where's it coming from?
It doesn't exist. It moved from a plant to a plant, and certainly this amount has been reconciled since in the 11 years since 2001. The physical inventory doesn't exist. I'm asking them to eliminate it. It's going to take some help from the IT department. And then 5th, either remove or properly label and dispose of an open barrel of motor oil currently stored at the River Division. Eliminate it from SAP inventory records at this location, and do not order a replacement. This is a kind of a leftover from the days that they needed oil at the River Division and they service their own equipment. Now there's a lube truck that goes out every week or so and services the equipment, and they don't need to have this oil on hand. And as a matter of fact, it's a hazmat issue. And Water Department Manager Jesse Silva has asked them to take care of this, and I contacted responsible personnel at the River Division, and they agreed to let me know when in fact it has left the premises. And number 6, eliminate the 12 quarts of bulk motor oil currently reported in inventory at the SAP Imperial Service Station storage location. Eliminate it from inventory records at this location and do not order a replacement. Now, 12 quarts, that may sound like, why did he go to the trouble of writing a recommendation about that? Can't they just take care of it? Well, in fact, it's been several years since there's been activity. The 12 quarts doesn't exist, and mostly with the 12 courts. Why we're concerned is that Fleet Services has told us they've tried to requisition it and get rid of it, but they can't get it done. There's some underlying SAP configuration issues that, again, they're going to need the IT department's cooperation to work out. IT department, being a responsible party to this, has agreed to help them with that. Are there any questions on any of these recommendations?
These are 12 courts that do not exist.
They do not exist.
They're the phantom courts.
Exactly. As is the 1,500 gallons of unleaded gasoline.
Any questions from the board?
No.
Okay, is there a, accept this,
I move to accept the report
is there a
as
second?
provided by Mr. Gottlieb.
Second.
Okay, please vote. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Ray.
Time.
Thank
you
you.
very much. Number 20, amendment to policy number 3130, competitive procurements and contracts. And Vance Taylor, you're going to handle that?
Yes, good afternoon, President Menville, members of the board, Vance Taylor, Assistant Counsel. The item I'm presenting concerns a proposed amendment to the IID purchasing policy, policy number 3130. As you may recall, at the April 17, 2012 board meeting, the board approved an updated comprehensive procurement and solicitation policy. Subsequently, at the July 24, 2012 board meeting, the general manager announced that policy should be revisited so as to provide that all formal solicitations be evaluated with a greater emphasis on price. As such, the general manager directed staff to develop an amendment to existing policy that provides for 40% weighting on the price component of all formal solicitation responses. The revised policy contains two substantive changes. The first revision was designed to meet the general manager's mandate that price be given a 40% weighting on all formal solicitations. The portion of the policy dealing with evaluation of formal solicitations begins on page 12, Part C, evaluation of formal solicitations, and is continued on page 13, Part 4. The policy now provides that the evaluation criteria shall be configured in a manner so as to place a 40% weighting on the price component for formal solicitations. So in other words, on all future formal solicitations, 40 points out of a total possible 100 will be assigned pure cost. The second substantive revision was designed to address the concept of total cost of ownership and other factors that might justify a departure from award to the highest ranked respondent. The revised language appears on page 13, section E, award, Part I, which provides that award shall be made to the highest scoring best value respondent. And what we've added to that is as follows. Extenuating circumstances may justify award to other than the highest scoring respondent, including but not limited to the total cost of ownership associated with a particular solicitation, provided board approval is first obtained. This new language is designed to address the situation where the highest ranked respondent may not present the best overall price and or value to the district due to the notion of total cost of ownership. As an example, let's assume that we have an RFP for a new IID administration building. And in the RFP, let's assume that two proposals come back, one for a one-story complex at $1.1 million, and let's assume that the other is for a two-story complex, and that comes back at $1.2 million. Well, all things being equal, you would think that the one-story option at $1.1 million would probably make the best overall sense for the district. But when you consider the real property that would have to be purchased to satisfy the design footprint for the one-story building, let's assume that drives the price up to, say, 1.4 or 1.5 million. It's situations like this where staff, I think, would like to be able to go to the board and say, we'd like to depart from policy and award to, say, vendor A, because the total cost of ownership for this particular solicitation justifies going in that direction. I'll be happy to answer any questions about that if the board has any. And I should point out that in order for that to occur, board approval would have to be obtained. So if staff was going to depart from recommending an award to other than the highest rate respondent, they'd have to come before you and get permission to do that first.
How does these changes benefit us and I know it puts a little more load on staff and what they have to do, but how do these changes benefit us in the way that we're doing business here?
Well, the first revision for the 40% methodology, I think, is going to result in implementing the will of the board that greater weight be placed on the cost component of solicitations. So I think that's the benefit of that amendment. The other amendment, I would say, is somewhat for staff, because we're constantly confronted with this issue of, prices coming in which may on the surface appear to be the low cost, but when you dig into things a little bit deeper, you figure out that there's more to it than that. Another example that comes to mind is the wastewater treatment at the steam plant. I think the first option they looked at was some type of reverse osmosis or filtration system, and that was actually much cheaper than a deep injection well. But when you looked at the cost to replace the resin that removed the toxins out of the water, the total cost of ownership made the deep injection wells look a lot more sensible. So ultimately, that was the decision that was made. So I think that's what staff is looking for, the latitude to be able to present the board with those types of options so that the best possible decision could be made.
How does this help? We were criticized by CoLab and for the type of policy that we had, and we kind of rewrote some of the policy. And we still had somewhat criticism. I know Jimmy Duggins appeared before here and said we were about 95% correct in what we were passing. So how does this change or improvement help with what CoLab was looking at?
Well, for one thing, you've got the 40% weighting on costs. So now there'll be a greater emphasis on costs when solicitations are evaluated. And I think the second revision will have the effect of allowing these things to unfold in front of the public so that the public can see what staff's rationale is for making a particular recommendation, and then the public can see the interaction between the board and staff, and hopefully that will lead to greater transparency and a better understanding as to why decisions are made within the district with regard to procurement and purchasing matters.
Okay, well,
if I could, President Minville, I think that natural tension that IID struggles with between cost and value and the subjectivity of the evaluation committee, with 40% being assigned to cost, if the evaluation committee wants to recommend something other than the low-cost provider, it simply has to provide something like a sole source justification that you're already familiar with, and bring it to your board and be proud of it and justify it. And it's still dependent on your affirmative vote.
The reason I ask that is because I know CoLab is one of their 3 complaints, and IV First, super PAC that's gone after Director Mendoza and myself, spent $100,000 trying to take us off this board. They're still out looking for money, and one of the things they say is on the contract bidding, it says the IID has consistently chosen to forego the low bidder on projects for political reasons and refuses to rewrite their procurement policy to meet standard state codes. So that's my question. In making these changes, I know we're trying to make them more favorable to do business here as a district. So my question is, are we more along the lines of what they're looking for?
So I would expect with this greater weighting and taking away the latitude where cost could be as low as 25 points out of 100, that those instances in which staff or the evaluators recommend something other than the low-cost provider would be the exception, and you would see a marked reduction in that kind of thing.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing here is beneficial and helpful in the bidding process to make it more efficiently to do business with the district here, correct?
I think it is something that the business community would be in favor
because I
of.
know veg growers, Imperial Valley veg growers last Wednesday voted to give $5,000 to IV First to in opposition to Director Mendoza and Director Minville. And they have here, CoLab began the process of beginning a locally focused issue-based super PAC, formerly Imperial Valley First, where an issue-based PAC that will not be taking positions on candidates. Well, that's not true. But working instead to educate the public as the major issues throughout our valley with a focus this cycle on the IID. The 3 issues of focus for this cycle are, and one of them is contract bidding. The IID has consistently chosen to forego the low bidder on projects for political reasons and refuses to rewrite their procurement policy to meet standard state codes. And we've been working to try to make this better. This was an informational item. They knew it was on the agenda. They're aware of what's going on. They follow us, but yet they still put this kind of stuff out here. So we're not trying to do the right thing.
So this is a recommendation of the Oversight Committee, of which Mr. Taylor's a member, and it comes to you today to make it a part of the policy.
Right. All I'm saying is that we try to do what's right, we try to be transparent, we try to do the right thing around here, and there's still a group of people out there that just wants to get rid of 2 of the IID directors that sit on this board. They'll go to any lengths to do it. And the members of the Pure Valley Vegetable Growers are J.P. LaBrucherie, Wheeler Morgan, Andrew Colas, Bruce Samamatsu, Danny Colas, Larry Cox, Andrew Courier, Steve Don, Richard Elmore, Steve Emanuele, Robert Fleming, John Hawk, Mike Eiton, Alex Jack, Ali Luke, Jeff Percy, Ken Peterson, Frank Riddle, George Sturgis, Brian Strom, and Robert Trim. They all voted to give $5,000 to IV First because we're not taking care of certain things here at the district. Okay, that's all I have to say. Any other comments by board members?
I have a question. Mr. Taylor, have you heard back from the vendors that since we changed the policy that it's more cumbersome and that it's more detailed and it makes it more complicated for them to enter a bid because it's more paperwork? And
I would defer that to Donna Gray. I mean, perhaps she's had some contact. I haven't had any feedback myself, but she may have.
We just made it more difficult and more paperwork, and it's more difficult for them to submit a bid. Have you had that feedback from vendors, Mrs. Gray?
Would you come to the mic, Donna, please?
Donna Gray, purchasing agent. Actually, all of the things that you talked about were already addressed when we passed the 2 new procurement policies in April. Our bid process, there's 2 sides. There's the sealed bid and the formal solicitations. And in the sealed bidding, there had never been any rules that were broken in the way we did it. It was in accordance with policy. But the popular sentiment changes that we go with the sealed bidding process to award to the lowest responsible bidder. So that change really doesn't take us out of the realm of other public entities, so I haven't heard any complaints from vendors as far as that goes. It does take a little bit more effort on the side of the IID because we have to be more conscious now of the way a scope is written, scope of work, and the specifications so that it clearly denotes what's acceptable and what isn't. Unacceptable product will be rejected. So only those bids that conform, then you take the lowest. So that part hasn't changed. On the formal solicitation, dedicating 40 points to cost is a difference from other public entities. None of them state a specific amount, but this is the public sentiment again that is driving that. So we'll have to bring any recommendations for other than the lowest cost to the board and identify in front of you to say why we recommend this firm. They're a higher price, but this is what we get as a result of it.
You can see that this amendment enjoys broad support within the organization.
Donna, when the board passed this, when the board voted and passed these 2 policies, I know Mr. Duggins was here, and he said that we were about 95% where it should be. So by making these changes, which are more beneficial, even though it puts a little more work on the staff, How much closer does that get us to doing what's right?
We are doing what is right. The Public Contracts Code, we are doing actually more than the Public Contracts Code tells us that we have to, and we're making these changes so that it is very open for the public to understand how and why we make a decision, and when we make a recommendation that comes to you from the evaluation committee, you will know if they are not recommending the apparent low cost on a formal solicitation, and they'll explain why. So that example that Vance gave of total cost of ownership, it is not a fanciful cost. It is a real cost to the entity by taking this vendor's proposal. It isn't just the cost of what his building would cost, it's the cost of acquiring the extra land and the extra footprint, the extra plumbing, everything that would go with it. So those are real costs that you have to consider.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Any other questions from board members on this issue?
Yeah, in the past, I think there was 3 different cost factors that could be used for evaluation, 30, 40, and 50. So that's no longer available. It's standardized 40. Is that correct?
Across the board.
Across the board.
That's right. Yes.
And is there any other kind of report or feedback that you're hearing about local vendor requirements? Are we looking at those? Or are we getting any feedback that we need to be taking a look at those?
Anything on that, Donna?
No, we already have local vendor in both types of solicitations, so other than they're happy, I mean, that's what I've heard in the office.
I know. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I've got a comment to make. You know, we're dealing with public money, and we're also dealing with public employees, and we have an obligation to protect both. I understand this is an improvement, you know, over where we were the time before and the time before that. There just seems to be a resistance to make the move, pull the trigger, and get there. You know, it's this adaptive management format that we're going through is painful, and it just doesn't clear the air. Personally, I'm in support of a state contract code. The general manager would still have the right to suspend the policy in the event of emergency. So if we needed contract employees, like in some of the emergencies we had, they would be available. And the procurement committee could make a recommendation to the GM, and he could recommend to the board that we suspend policy or accept less than low bid was justifiable. But it takes all these issues, all these doubts, everything out of place, and that's what I would support. Thank you.
Sure. So it's clear, the policy that we have now complies with and goes way beyond anything that's in the Public Contracts Code for state entities. I mean, am I right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, as far as what irrigation districts are required to comply with,
But
we've regulated ourselves heavily.
Even beyond irrigation districts, let's assume we were a normal state agency and following the Public Contracts Code public bidding requirements, our policy complies with those requirements, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, everybody keeps saying we're not following the state law. I'm not sure which state law we're talking about. I understand that the irrigation district gave us some exclusions. We've overlooked those exclusions, and we've applied the law as if those exclusions didn't apply to us, and then we've gone beyond that, as far as I can tell.
I think that's probably one of the lies that Imperial Valley First likes to put out there so they can knock Mendoza and Menville off the board, because on their billboards they were putting up Mendoza and Menville sold our water to San Diego, which was a big lie. So, you know, they put in here, you got to meet state standard codes. Well, you just got finished saying we're meeting those codes. We're going above and beyond. So, you know, we're doing the best we can. We said that we would bring these things back, try and improve upon them. We brought this back. We passed this before. We brought this back. We're making an improvement. If there's more improvements, we'll bring it back. We'll make more improvements.
No, the bottom line, it's political. I move to approve.
Is there a second? I'll second it.
I got discussion. Is this Are we pre-qualifying our bids in this aspect in any scenarios, or is
In
it
some
all-
cases, we are. Like, for instance, I think we just did one for engineering services not long ago, or we're
They want to.
right. So the way that works is basically we'll take, I guess, we do a qualifications request, right? And then we get pretty much the curriculum vitae of, all the different applicants, and those are evaluated, I guess, whether or not they meet the minimum criteria for the QR. And then after that, it's just based on price, isn't it?
That, yes.
Right. We do that in some scenarios, not all. There's QRs, there's RFPs, and
Okay, any
Well,
further
this-
discussion?
field bids.
This issue's been out there for some time. It was, in prior elections, it was out there too.
Any further discussion by the board? Okay, please vote. Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to item number 21, approval of amendment number 4, service agreement number 81-1257 with IntelliBind.
Tino Zaragoza, Reliability Compliance Officer. This amendment number 4 to service agreement with IntelliBind for compliance office support was presented in the September 11th board meeting. I guess I would ask if there are any questions.
I have no questions, and I'd like to recommend that the board approve amendment number 4 to service agreement 81-1257 to IntelliBind.
Is there a second to that, please? I'll second it. Is there any discussion by the board?
Yeah. Mr. Zaragoza, what kind of timeline are you looking at for the continuation of this service? Is this something that you think we're going to be, over a long period of time, or is staff getting up to speed on it? No, if you don't have the proper training, you don't have the sufficient staff, that the end result in terms of fines and so forth would make this look minimal. I'm just wondering, what type of progress, what type of buy-in are we getting?
Definitely seen improvements in the last 2 years since I've been compliance officer. The resources that have been added, such as the compliance administrators, and some of the efforts that have been put forth, for example, in standards development, help staff be more familiar with the standards and have a better understanding. So as they prepare to comply with the standards, there's more opportunities out there that are being taken advantage of, and from my perspective, I see that we are doing better. The standards are always changing. There's a lot out there. For this particular service agreement, we're asking to go through 2014. Again, as we continue past the next audit, I think we'll be looking at our options and where we stand. But certainly there have been improvements in the understanding and the effort that is needed to comply with the standards.
We talked about this on information. This service contract, or this amount here, that takes us further into the future, into the next audit cycle. Is that?
That's correct. It takes us, we are scheduled for our next compliance audit in December of 2013 with WEC.
And this takes us through that?
This takes us through that, past that, yes.
So the original hire for IntelliBind was specifically to get us prepared for an audit, which we've gotten through, and now they're still here with us and taking us into the next audit cycle.
That's correct.
Who will implement the mock audit?
IntelliBind will be performing the mock audit.
Do that last time for us?
They actually, there was another consultant that performed a mock audit, and then IntelliBind came and conducted what we termed a gap analysis in June of 2010 for SIPs, and then they performed an additional review in 2010, June 2010, they performed a gap analysis and additional review of standards leading into the audit. And then in 2011, September last year, they performed an overall assessment of the standards.
Are you confident that by them giving the mock audit and the training, that you'll get a broad enough evaluation?
The mock audit's going to be specific. We're defining the scope. I'm confident that it'll help us prepare for the audit and give us an opportunity to actually go through the exercise and prepare staff for it's been almost 2 years, and it'll be 2.5 years when we do perform our next planned mock audit. It'll certainly prepare us and give us a lot of lessons learned going into the next mock audit, next WEC audit in December of next year.
Well, if they're providing the training and the mock audit, there shouldn't be any gaps.
Well,
And that's what worries me.
right.
Yeah, I'd like to see those gaps identified.
Certainly, there will be standards that they'll review as part of this mock audit. Even with WEC, just to clarify, when WEC comes and performs an audit, they audit to a subset of the entire scope, entire set of standards that IID is required to comply with. Similar to that, IID, IntelliBind will conduct a mock audit, and any gaps that they identify will address at that time and leading up until the audit. What I will say is that, like with WEC, we can there are still standards that will not necessarily be reviewed by this mock audit.
And just so the board knows, we're probably going to be talking in closed session at the next board meeting about the retention of a litigation consultant and potentially an expert witness for the FERC investigation. A vast majority of the issues raised in the FERC investigation are going to be reliability issues, and we're going to need somebody to consult with and perhaps to be an expert witness, and it overlaps with these types of issues.
Well, I think IntelliBind is actually very reasonable insurance, again, an issue like that.
It's the cycle or the time period that's represented by this item in front of us. When we get to the end of this term with IntelliBind, do you see us weaning ourselves off IntelliBind, or do they stay with us for a longer run?
We'll evaluate that following the audit. I see us evaluating all our options in terms of what's best for the IID in terms of consultants to move forward. At this time, we're recommending to stay with IntelliBind because of the time frame with the WEC audit, keeping momentum going and making improvements following the September 8th outage.
So they are helping with September 8th outage.
For some compliance issues, we certainly have gone to them, but I think that's in detail. That's part of what
I think
Mr.
that's what we're
Garber's
going to talk about
referring to.
next week.
Yeah. When IntelliBind was originally brought on, was it viewed as a one-time event or one-time employment, or this continuous?
Well, originally the contract was, I believe it was through April 2013. So what we've seen is that in non-audit years, we continue to seek their guidance on issues and assess standards that we have or provide advice on compliance, but certainly leading into a year where we have an audit, the efforts have stepped up. And when I referred to the September 8th outage, there's a component in here for the service agreement to help IID with its compliance program and to help IID identify where we can make improvements with regard to internal controls. And so those are the type of steps that we feel, following the outage, we can look for those opportunities and make improvements that we can certainly demonstrate in the next year and a half.
Okay, any further questions? We have a motion and a second on the floor. If there are no further questions, we'll please vote. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to item number, thank you, Tino. We'll move on to item number 22, approval of power content disclosure report. Glenn Valenzuela is going to handle that.
President and the Board of Directors. I am here this afternoon to go over the Power Content Disclosure Report, which is actually a requirement of Senate Bill 1305 and Assembly Bill 162. Basically, what it requires is that load-serving entities or utilities actually post to make public to their consumers in an accurate and simple format what actual generation resources are used to meet its load requirements. So this of course goes to our web, and we'll go on the web and also go through the consumers' bills in October. So basically, what it's showing you is in 2011 what our actual content was, and compared to the state of California's overall, and then also what we're projecting 2012. So I really wanted to kind of point out is also this kind of comes into play, the renewable portfolio standards. And as you can see, in 2011, we were about 8.68% compared to the state about 14.5%. But based on the contracts and stuff that we do have in place and executed, we are on target for 2012 to be a little bit over 20% for our RPS. Is there any questions regarding this content?
Any questions from the board for Glenn before we take action?
I just want to point out, under the unspecified sources of power, those are the ones we basically find on the market.
Yeah, the imports, yes.
So what impact do you think that will be? I mean, there'll be more renewables that people have to be. Will that dump more on the market, even though there's a smaller percentage available? I mean, flexibility that we have, or?
Is this on? As far as IID is concerned, what you will probably see happen is we're finding we'll be importing less because of those.
Right.
Most of the renewables that we have are actually all of them are in our area. So you'll see that import decline for IID.
What we do import, will that be a buyer's market?
Well, it's hard for me to say. We've seen some pretty good prices over the summer. Now in August they did shoot up, but yeah, you could. I mean, Director Hanks, it's kind of hard for me to say. But of course, you could see a lot more gas-fired units available too. But at the same time, they say there's going to be more gas-fired units needed to follow the solar resources also.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a motion to accept this?
I just wanted to go over something really quick.
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted the board to keep in mind, as far as the RPS, that it does show over 20% for 2012. And for 2013, based on these contracts that we've got locked in, we will be close to 30%. And the reason why is because for that compliance period 1 is, remember, it's based on 3 years, 11, 12, and 13. So it's going to take that average. So basically what you're seeing is us put on some pretty heavy renewables to make up for that first year. So in order to meet the 20%, we've had to put on, get pretty aggressive in 2012 and 13.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second it. But Belinda, also the geothermal that we've brought on in the summertime only.
Yes.
That's going to be good for one more summer?
Yes.
And then you have plans in the works to replace that into our stack?
Well, actually, we're looking at it. I didn't think we were. I'm not sure we'll have to replace it. I mean, we looked at. Remember the biomass facility that we put on? Yes. We were only able to benefit from 1.5 years of it for this first compliance period, but since we'll be able to benefit from it for the full compliance period for 2, we won't need as much. But we are looking at some additional. Because what I did go back and look at, we are seeing some load growth and some growth in the retail sales, which that's what's used to calculate the 20%. So we're looking at right now it's about 4% higher than 2011. So that's, if you look on there, that planned renewables geo/solar, I've got about 1.91% that I'm kind of leaving there as a place mark to cover any load growth. So that's one I don't have locked in yet, but the rest has been locked in, and we're actually taking energy from those resources.
Thank you, Blinn.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. Thank you. We'll move on to item 23, approval of 2012 energy capital funding with commercial paper, electrical distribution projects. Mr. Broking.
Yes, my presentation pertains to items 23 and 24, so if it's okay with the board, I'll go through the presentation and go through the items individually.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
I know you've all seen this slide before. This is from our 2012 approved budget. It shows the amount of monies available from rates for capital projects, and it's $5 million, and obviously it's not enough to sustain the district on a long-term basis. We need more funding than that for our capital projects. And then originally, the 2012 budget was, capital was about $160 million through July of this year. And I'll talk about that a little more later on another item. We've only spent about $60 million. When we develop our five-year model, and we have a five-year model on both electric and the water side of the business, we have a financial strategy that goes into that, and certain metrics to it we're trying to achieve or maintain. And for the energy department, our goal is to have working capital between 50 and 150 million. As of the end of July, we had a little over 13 million in there. We had a rate stabilization goal of up to $100 million, and we have achieved that. At the end of July, we have $100 million in that account. And then in a capital reserve, we can put up to $100 million into that, but at this point, no money has been set aside to fund that reserve. Some of our financial targets for debt service coverage and capital requirements is debt as a percentage of equity and working capital reserves. For our debt service coverage target, it's 2 times debt service is our target. Over the next 5 years, we project that to be at a low of 1.63 times to a high of 2.38 times. We have a target or a goal of maintaining debt to equity at 40 to 60%, and we expect to be within that range over the next 5 years. And then maintaining 125 million in working capital, and we expect to get up to that $125 million during the range we're talking about. So some of the major assumptions that went into this 5-year forecast. First one is there would be a base rate increase effective February 1, 2013, and we've talked about that before. The ECA rate would be calculated using the current formula. It assumes using all the overcollection that's currently in the ECA account. It would be utilized in 2013, and per board direction from last year's budget, we would also bring in $25 million from the rate stabilization fund to offset renewable power supply cost for the 4-year period beginning in 2013. So obviously using that $25 million will keep the ECA rate lower than what it would have been without using that $25 million. Also included in the 5-year forecast is that we would issue long-term refunding bonds in 2013 and 2014 of $25 million each, and we would also issue commercial paper in 2012 and 2013 of $25 million each. So if the board approves the commercial paper program, we'd issue $25 million in this year. We would refund that with long-term debt in 2013 and do a similar type process for 2013. Issue another $25 million of commercial paper and take it out with long-term debt in 2014. And then the last one of the last major assumptions is that we would utilize the Balancing Authority Reserve Fund for transmission capital projects. And from our point of view, all transmission capital projects are spent or incurred to support the Balancing Authority. A couple of line items I want to point out on this spreadsheet, or this slide. I know there's a lot of numbers, but cash available for capital, as you can see, in 2012, we have that $5 million number, and that's cash available for capital from rates. So this is really net capital that's available. You see that it goes up from there in 13, 14, 15, and 16, and that is primarily because of the rate increase that we've factored into our forecast. And then the next line item that I would like to highlight is the system average rate. In 2012, we're forecasting it to be 11.72 cents per kilowatt hour. Before we started decreasing rates and returning about $77 million to our customers, that rate in last July was about 13.4 cents. So what we're proposing in 2013 will still be below what it was in 2011 before we started lowering the rates. It's not until 2014 do the rates get above what they were back in 2011. And you can see most of that increase, or just about all of it, is really being driven by renewable power supply cost. To reiterate what I mentioned earlier, the forecast assumes a 1 cent base rate increase beginning February 2013. It has $25 million of long-term debt in 2013, $25 million in long-term debt in 2014. It has no other long-term debt in 15 or 16. And we used the ECA rate the ECA rate was forecasted based on the March 2012 power supply forecast. These are the gross numbers that are available for energy capital spending out in the future. And the reason why they differ they're higher than the numbers I talked about on the prior page is these include CSP projects where there's customer funding and also from bond funding. So it's funding other than rates, also provides monies for capital projects. And as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, our forecast may not have capital funding at a level to fully protect the balancing authority and maintain reliable service. As Carl mentioned earlier, he's working on his plan. Basically, it's a 5-year plan as to how much they're looking to need to maintain and protect the system. So right now, this is more of a financial forecast showing how much money is available. In reality, based on our forecast, transmission has around $16 million a year to spend on capital, and distribution has somewhere around 20 or 25. That's all that's available in this forecast that we're
Greg, in the presentation, does it show what we're going to do in 2014? Do you believe we're going to still need to do another $25 million of commercial paper in 2014 to make our budget whole?
Right now, the answer would be no. We don't have that forecast. We have $25 million in 12 and 13 of commercial paper.
The answer is no to you don't have the forecast ready, but right now to make the budget work, the budget that we're going to be working on with, in addition to the 1 cent increase that we're talking about in February, we're also going to be assuming a $25 million draw of commercial paper.
In 2013, and then issuing bonds in 2014.
And issuing bonds in 2014.
At these capital levels. Obviously, if these capital levels go up, then we're going to have to adjust our forecast. We talked about this before. It's recalculate the ECA rate effective February 1, 2013, and when we do that, we'll factor in the current or existing overcollection in developing that rate. We'll float the ECA rate monthly thereafter. We'll use $25 million from the Rate Stabilization Fund to offset renewable power supply costs beginning in January 2013, and we have a proposed base rate increase of 1 cent effective February 2013.
In the current ECA over collection account, the account above the $100 million, we've gone through approximately $8 million in the last 3 months, so that should leave us somewhere around $38 to $40 million. Is that right?
I think there's around 40 some odd million in the ECA over collection right
What's the plans with that?
It will be used to, it will be given back to the customer, and the effect will be a lower ECA rate.
That'll be given back in the next 2 years?
Year or so.
And then in addition to giving that back, we will be burning up $25 million a year of rate stabilization money?
That's correct, beginning in 2013.
Beginning 2013?
Yes, that's per the board's action last budget, and for the 2012 budget, they
So 2013
voted to use that beginning in 2013.
At the end of 2013, our rate stabilization account will be somewhere around $75 million, and then our
Correct.
ECA over collection account will be somewhere around zero.
That's correct.
So $65 million.
Okay, Craig, do you want to vote on this one, or you want to go over the next one at the same time, you said?
Well, let me finish this slide, and I'll go back to the first
ahead.
item. We'll talk about that in a little more detail. We do plan on issuing long-term refunding bonds for the 2012 CP draw, and then issue another $25 million for distribution, transmission, and generation projects for 2013, and then use the Balancing Authority Reserve Fund to fund transmission capital. And obviously, Path 42 project has priority over those funds. As I mentioned earlier, it generates about $16 million a year through this fund on a yearly basis, and I think that will be enough money over the next 2 years, 2.5 years, to fund Path 42, but not much else. So then if I could go back to the page, this 193 of the board package.
Now, this one that we're discussing right now is the same one that you brought before the ECAC on Monday night and got the approval of them to move this forward,
Yes,
correct?
the ECAC has approved both of these agenda items.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
What staff's recommending that the board approve a draw of $25 million for energy capital projects, commercial paper, so for both generation and distribution projects. The lion's share of the money will be used for distribution projects. And then on page 194 and 195, we've listed around $23 million of distribution projects that we think we will spend this year. So that's where the bulk of the $25 million would go to if the board approved that.
Okay, you want a separate motion on this one?
I do, yes.
Okay, is there a motion to move forward with the $25 million on commercial paper?
I'd like to move that we approve the draw of $25 million from the Energy Commercial Paper Program for the 2012 Energy Capital Projects.
All right, is there a second to that? Okay, I'll second it. Is there further discussion by the board?
Yeah, I've got a question for Mario and Carl. That $25 million that we're going to be drawing for the rest of this year, we'll be able to go through that on these projects and get it all out there by the end of the year?
I should point out that part of this $25 million will be used to reimburse projects this year that have already been completed, and also future projects for the year.
Yeah, you should tell us that.
How much have been completed already?
Over over on page 227, distribution has spent about $18 million so far this year.
So that'll go to pay that back, but where is that money going to go back to?
It'll go into our working capital account.
Okay.
Mr. Broking,
Mm-hmm.
let me help you, you help me here, okay?
Okay, I'll try.
All right. Let's go to transmission first. Let's say that we use 17 million of the balancing authority that we set aside for protection of the balancing authority. And you mentioned something about, well, you use that as it comes in. If you use commercial paper, which I believe you have authorization for an amount, up to a certain amount, if you use commercial paper as needed, say during next budget year, even before these funds come in, could you not then just repay commercial paper off at the end of the year?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, let's take this year. This year, PAT 42, and we need to spend this year. So we need to spend 12 million. And through the year, by the end of the year, you'll have the 12 million collected in the balancing authority reserve. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you need to move on this right away, you could use commercial paper, and then at the end of the budget year, then defease that commercial paper that you use on transmission for that with the balancing authority money.
But I'm not planning on using the commercial paper for transmission projects.
I understand that. But you said as it comes on, but I'm talking about in the event that we need to move and move quick.
Oh, okay. Now, if there's not enough money in the balancing authority fund, what monies could we use to fund the transmission projects?
Well, I'm just thinking in terms, it's like a cash flow. The language you use here, you would use that as it becomes available. So you could use commercial paper and then just use that to defease your commercial paper.
I'd probably more than likely just take it out of reserves, depending upon the amount,
okay,
and then pay yourself back.
All right. Now here's another part. We're talking about 25 million this year for distribution, and another 25 next year. Okay.
Yes.
So in terms of this board setting rates, the 25 million of commercial paper, we're talking about using either bond or COP, something to pay it out, some funding source of choice,
yes.
okay,
Yeah.
whatever choice is, okay? The 25 million that he's using this year and next year should not be put on the backs of the current users all in 1 year. So therefore we borrow, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean,
what is the annual debt service on this amount? So if we're talking 25 million for 1 year, the annual debt service off of that would what, be 2 million?
it'd probably be a little less than 2 million, maybe
Okay,
one
so
and
50 would be
3/4.
about 4. So when we're building the budget, now we're talking about we're needing to cover that 4 million or 5 million, that debt service, okay? But we're looking at a cent. Are you looking at building up the reserve? Are you looking at are there other costs out there other than capital that you need that money for? Where are those funds going to be utilized?
Yes, we're actually looking at all costs that the district incurs, and the 1 cent with the borrowing gets us those coverages that I talked about earlier, providing, we don't spend, providing everything works out the way we forecasted, which it never does. But those are targets we're trying to hit, and we're going to hit them based on our forecast.
Okay. I think one of the goals that the board had over the years that we've been looking at this with the rate stabilization and the overcollection is as we increase the base rate, that we try to keep the total rates pretty stable. We know at some point in time that's going to run out, that rate stabilization, and it's going to creep on up, but starting out. But what I think would be very helpful for the board for budget building, rate setting, and total would look at the long-term financing of the structures, the capital projects that are what I call generational. The user at that time during that year pays for it. Okay, no free ride for anyone. Everyone pays over a period of time. And calculate that back in. What is that going to be for a rate increase, and where these funds are going to help us track where these are going to go, and we get to a position that you feel comfortable. But at the same time, we're working with the ratepayers. Say, okay, we've got 3 years out that we're going to do a drawdown, and after that, it becomes another percentage, or at that time you may want to look at the balancing of authority reserve, and maybe move that back to the ECA. I don't know, but I'm just, it would help me if I knew what those projected costs were, what the debt service was, so whenever we're looking at adjusting the rates, that while we're rolling back on the ECA and looking at the base rate, that we know exactly where those funds are going. Because right now it appears that it's all going to capital, and it's not.
So you're talking about the pie chart.
Yeah, and I'm just talking about when they're developing the budget, that'd be the time to put it all together.
Tracking the rates.
We can do that. As you can see by this chart, we have the revenue and expenses laid out, and we'll just identify the major components of each of those. And I think that'll answer your question as to where's the money going.
Yeah, and it's and I think in our budget building in the future years that'll help us too, because now we're getting past using capital to balance the budget or to cover those costs. We know out front what's available. You got your commercial paper stream, but you also have a way to repay back. And likewise on the transmission side, if something comes up and you need to use commercial paper, you can use the payback off of that balancing authority that year, and that would also save a lot of interest money or out of the reserves like what you're talking about. And I think it's important that we spread these costs out over again, the generational use, and we set the rates accordingly to that.
Most of these projects that the energy department, and even for that matter what the water department does on the capital side, they could last, the asset could last upwards of 30 years or more. The trick is you can't borrow for all your long-term capital, because you got to meet certain debt service coverage requirements, and to meet those you got to keep raising your rates year after year just to meet the coverage requirements. Well, so that's why we have the target of 40 to 60% debt equity. That helps mitigate. It does two things. One, it helps mitigate the need for rate increases, but it also provides a lot of financial stability to your organization by not being 100, 80 or 90% in debt.
At some point in time, we have to look at some of this and see whether it's O&M ahead. What about our depreciation? Where does that go?
Well,
Did that get
depreciation
used on some of this?
just is just used in our financial statements. We budget based on a cash basis, so depreciation is excluded from our budget and is excluded from our rate making process.
Okay.
Now, if we were an investor-owned utility, then that wouldn't be the case because there is a depreciation component in their rates. There's also a component which we don't have either.
Well, I think we can cover capital and some of these other issues, but I still think, as far as the ratepayer goes, the total cost, I think it could be pretty much neutral. That would be a goal anyway to shoot for. That would we make it to a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years, but at some point in time, it will use up those rate stabilization funds. But hopefully then our capital is caught up some too.
Well, I always hope for that, but I've found out from experience that that's a never-ending.
Easier on paper, huh?
Pardon me?
It's easier on paper.
Yeah, it's there's always demands to maintain the system and improve reliability, and it just costs money. And
haven't you had extensive hours of discussions on this issue with certain board members, and you've come to the terms that this is the best way at this point in time to protect our balancing authority to handle this thing with this commercial paper?
Yes, that's my recommendation.
Yes, because I mean you've had discussions with the board members on what's the best way to do this, and this is what you're recommending to the board on how we handle this situation in order to best protect the balancing authority of the Imperial Irrigation District.
Yes, the district, in my opinion, is in the need of a rate increase immediately or effective the first part of 2013, because there's not enough money to do what the district needs to do to maintain its system and deliver service. And so we're doing it with a combination of debt and rate increases.
I know in my travels as trying to get reelected to the board, I've talked to a lot of people out there, and we made it through the summer. We didn't have any blackouts. We had a tremendous amount of storms. I think that the energy side, the infrastructure has done a very good job, but we're basically operating on a shoestring out here, and there's certain things that we have to improve upon, and most people know that we have to keep the system up. It's like a house. You got to put a new roof on a house. You got to put a new air conditioner unit on. If you don't take care of the house, the foundation is going to fall apart. So we have to bite the bullet. We have to borrow the money, and we have to keep the system working in a proper manner so we can keep the lights on for the ratepayers. That's kind of what it's all about. We get blamed for borrowing money. Guy wrote an article the other day saying we just keep borrowing money, and we're deficit spending and et cetera, but you got to keep this utility going.
One thing I'd just like to emphasize again is that what we project to be over about a 17-month period, the rate decreases that we've had has benefited the ratepayer by about $77 million.
Yeah, big time.
What we estimate.
You've gone from 13.4 cents a kilowatt hour down to 11.72.
Yeah.
Basically, we got the lowest energy rates in Southern California. And it's been a big benefit. People have said, hey, my bill's lower. Open up the bill. My bill's lower. My last bill was $290 out at my house. And last year, we were pushing close to $400.
So that certainly helped during the recession as times were tough. But we can tell from our load, and as Mrs. Valenzuela mentioned earlier, our load is starting to go up again, and it's up this year. So things are looking better. That's one way I look at how things are getting better in the valley overall, is if your electricity load is going up, because we're one of the few utilities that have a load growth right now. Most of them are still experiencing either no load growth or negative growth. So not that we're past the hump economically, but we're certainly going in the right direction as long as our load is going up.
Yeah, with the the renewable requirement is not just the increase in the renewable energy itself, but it also takes away some of the margin of flexibility you had on other sources,
That's correct.
because those are fixed, you know, so those opportunities are kind of sliding away, you know, so it's even more important on our PPA contracts with renewables that we really drive a hard bargain there.
Yes, Mrs. Valenzuela will have less flexibility the closer we get to 2020, because that's the higher the percentage goes.
Okay, any further questions from board members on?
I should have mentioned this when Ms. Valenzuela was up here, but I spoke with her last week. She's tracking those solar PPAs that IID issued late last year, and there's a possibility that none of those will come online during this first reporting period. And so she has some contingency planning that she's doing now. And I'm sure you noted that in the space of about 9 months, we've gone from 8.5% to over 20. So
Okay, but
kudos to her.
No further questions, please. We have a motion, a second. Please vote. All right, thank you. And then we'll go on to the next item, which is number 24. Greg, go ahead with that.
Yes. What staff is recommending that the board authorize the utilization of the Balancing Authority Reserve funds as they become available in the amount of $10 million for transmission project expenditures, and I'm talking about capital.
I couldn't hear what he said. Greg, you're going to have to speak up.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're asking the board really to, at this point, to reimburse the department for expenditures that they've made year to date. I think there's been about $10 million of those so far. There's $9 million in the fund. And I should say that I don't have a presentation for this in particular. And if you go to page 206 of the board package, those are the projected transmission capital for the year, 206 and 207. 208 is what's been spent through June. That's $10 million. Through July, we have about $9 million in that fund. So what we're proposing to do is basically moving the money out of the Balancing Authority Fund up into the Working Capital Fund. And then, as we need to reimburse ourselves for transmission capital only.
Is that for Path 42?
Yes, Path 42 monies will come out of this fund. Right now, the last estimate I had was about $2 to $3 million possibly would be needed this year, and there would be enough money in the fund to reimburse us for that for this year. And then there'll also be enough money to pay for the SOC personnel that the board authorized a few months back.
So if we keep the ECA rate the same, then there's basically an equivalent drawdown.
Well, there would be up to a $16 million drawdown.
Yeah.
For the year.
Okay.
If the board authorized it.
Okay, is there a motion for this item? Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion? Please vote. Move on to number 25, acknowledge receipt of financial reports for July 31, 2012, page 218.
I would like to update the board on the debt defeasance of the water department. We were able to finalize paying off all the water department's long-term debt today, except for the pension bond and a few leases. The water department is debt-free. We defeased the 2010 and 2011 bonds on Friday through a legal escrow, And today we finalized the purchase of the Western Farmland 2034 term bond with Dexia. And by purchasing the bond directly from Dexia, as opposed to using a legal defeasance, we saved about $950,000. So for whatever reason, this time Dexia was willing to sell to us, and it was beneficial to us, and I'm sure it was beneficial to them too. And a couple other things I'd like to update the board regarding the water department. Finance does a yearly update on the water transfer revenue and expenditures. We're in the process of updating our water model, and in October we will be back with a presentation to the board like we've done in past years. But just a couple things I want to highlight about that. And we have included in our forecast, at least in the short term, the payback overrun for next year is included in our forecast. But the way we've forecasted it, I don't believe is a long-term solution, because we're getting $20 an acre foot for that water, and we're paying back could be up to $125 an acre foot. So obviously you're not making money doing that, and you can't do that in the long term. So, something will have to be done soon about how to handle the payback overrun. And the other thing that's causing a little, I wouldn't say it's short-term stress, but will increase expenditures for the water department in the near term, is now we're catching up on the fallowing program. We had the delay for 6 months or so during the litigation, and that now we're back fallowing and trying to catch up. So it's more water we need to fallow, and it's at a higher price. But the forecast that we have is satisfactory to support those expenses. And then after that, then the doubling up, so to speak, of trying to catch up will go away in a year, and it'll be more of a normal cash flow for the water department. And then one other change we're making on the borrowing side is, and I've mentioned this before, that we're going to start buying our computers, we're going to start buying our trucks and equipment. We're not going to lease them anymore.
Is this like the pendulum goes back and forth? You buy them and then you lease them. Now you're going to buy them.
Yes.
Make up your mind.
Well, they're
kind of like general managers and board members back and forth.
The reason I'm suggesting we do that is the water department still has funds to lease and incur debt, but the energy department right now is not in a position to really incur any more debt than's necessary. So we think we can squeeze additional life out of the assets by doing this, and so we're going to...
So Greg, financially, is it better to buy than to lease?
Well, I think it's always cheaper to buy than to lease, but by leasing, you lower your long-term debt, or your overall interest rate. So the interest rate is so low, it helps you push down your overall interest rate and allows you to borrow less on the long term. And so that's what we've been using it in the past for, but circumstances, in my opinion, at least my opinion, the circumstances have changed for the energy department, and they need to pay as they
When
go.
you say you're going to be buying computers, with technology changing so rapidly, aren't they going to become obsolete quickly? Aren't you better off leasing them and then sending them back and getting...
I don't think so, because when we lease right now, I think that's for, I think 2 years for a laptop and 3 years for a desktop. But the computer technology is not going to be changing that much, and the computer I have now can last me for as long as it doesn't fall apart. I won't need a new computer, because I'm not that type of a user that I need the latest technology. Now there may be some users that have to have their computer replaced more often or more regularly, but I would say most of the people in finance could use a computer for 4 to 6 years before they needed it replaced.
Okay, is there a motion to accept?
I move to accept.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, please vote. Okay, now we're going to go back to consent. We got item number 2 on the consent, and item number 5.
I would ask the board if we could table that. I'd like to talk with Mario about it, unless it's an item that you have to have right away. I mean,
Well,
if you need before that, we can go ahead.
well, that was my question, Mr. Escalera. Is this time of the essence for this?
No, don't use that word. It's always that way.
No, because we had discussed this before. And
Yeah, we discussed it before, but there's other information that came up, and I want to talk to him unless you want me to do it here in public. And I'll do that.
do it here.
What's the other information?
Just do it here in public.
No, I'd rather do it outside.
Mario, what's come up that what the board didn't know about before?
I really,
He doesn't know either.
I don't know either, so,
I'm aware of it, and it would be a good idea to take the extra time.
sure. I mean, a week or two is not going to hurt us.
Okay.
If it goes beyond that, then we are running into the end of the
So
year.
bring it next week then?
When did you become aware of this issue?
I believe it was from PMO.
Was it before we set the agenda or after?
After.
What's,
But what it has to do with is undergrounding, and I think that they can get to the bottom of it relatively quickly.
So,
I mean, this may be the place, but I would certainly hope, General Manager, that when PMO has an issue on a project that I'm signing off on, is they would come to me first and not necessarily go to my boss first.
well,
I think that my recollection of it is that it was the way that it was presented last week, and that might have led to a misunderstanding about Imperial versus how things are done in Coachella.
Well, I can certainly discuss that, but certainly if I feel confident in what I stated and the difference that these projects were handled.
So I think you can probably get to the bottom of it quickly.
Things are done differently in Coachella because Coachella mandates that you underground.
Right.
Imperial Valley doesn't always mandate that you have to underground, and there's a cost factor. Coachella's got a higher rate of return up there compared to what we do business down here with. You know, I mean, from a developer standpoint, they got rules and regulations. They make everybody underground up there.
I think that Mario can knock it down in relatively short order.
well,
sure.
I'd like to make a comment. So what is Mr. Escalera and the rest of the board? Are we chopped liver that we're not included in this conversation? We talk about transparency. And so you have one board member and the GM. They have this PMO information and not the rest of the board.
I never,
and the interim energy manager?
No, I never spoke with Director Hanks about it. I learned about it.
I didn't learn about it through PMO. I learned called this morning about it.
Yeah, I learned about it in a sort of a sidelong ways with PMO, through PMO.
Oh, so much about transparency. Let's go on to number 5 then.
We got a board member here who talks about transparency, but he's not willing to share
What's number 5?
Well, did you want to vote to table that then?
Yeah.
Can we do that?
That's fine. We'll move on to number 5. Quick claim deed.
I don't think there has been a vote on it. I'll make a motion to approve it.
Okay, that's fine. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, please vote.
Now, wait a minute. Now we're going to discuss it.
Oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
we'll discuss it then.
Mario.
Yes.
In the underground conduit, is there a cable in there?
Is there a cable in the
No.
existing?
Is there existing wire in there? Do we know whether it works or not?
I'd have to check with that. That's a question I can't answer for you right now. My understanding is that we were pulling new cable.
Okay.
Now, that's my impression.
Now, we also had the issue of Raleigh with the trees coming down that are in the wires, distribution wires,
Yes.
okay? After this last deal with this was discussed, I had a call this morning and said, well, why can't we underground?
Well, the two differences in the projects is that the one in La Quinta is done to be able to tie 2 additional circuits together. The one in La Quinta isn't being underground. It's not an existing circuit that's going overhead to underground. There is conduit in the ground that does not have all of the wires in there to be able to tie it from another circuit coming in. The idea is to relieve the load off of one circuit and divide it into two circuits. We're literally making a brand new circuit in those existing conduits. So it's really not the same type of project. A more similar project would be the one that we're doing, say, the one that was discussed this morning, or not this morning, but earlier the day was Nyland, where we're actually replacing an existing circuit. The one in Nyland, from when I reviewed the engineering report and the engineering request, this is installing a brand new circuit under existing conduit.
Okay.
Now, if there's other information that hasn't been brought to my attention.
You don't know whether there's a cable in there or wire in there, yeah.
If there's wire in there, there shouldn't be. There's typically pull wire. You know, when a lot of times when we install conduit in anticipation of coming back at a later date, there's wire that's in there that was used to pull the new load cable wire. But if your understanding, Director Hanks, is that there's an existing cable there.
I don't know that. I just was.
I can't imagine that there is, because
An added cost. Nobody'd do that. There's a pull wire.
if there was wire in there, we would have connected.
The pull wire, they wouldn't put a wire in there.
Yeah.
It'd be
I would ask you to go look.
I'll check, and I can certainly bring that back forward. I can't imagine that there's existing wire in those conduits. Okay. Otherwise, the cost would be considerably less than what we are asking for.
We also have a policy on underground. If they're seeking underground, there's additional costs to it.
If there's a what?
There's additional costs for undergrounding.
There is additional costs underground compared to overhead.
No,
big time.
I'm talking about we're going to put some more underground. And
if I may, there is a policy where it's never been funded, that if a city or an agency requests to have an existing circuit underground, and the city of Indio has done it quite a couple of times when they have actually paid for all of it. There's a policy in the district that we would be able to contribute to undergrounding an existing facility. This doesn't apply to this one because this is a brand new circuit. There's only conduits in the ground. When the developer came in and did the original subdivision, we requested him that he put conduits in there with the idea of coming back later when they needed and there was an additional load to come in and then just run the cables. So you're correct, Director Hanks. There is a policy for undergrounding of existing facilities. To my knowledge, the only one that has ever asked to use it has been the city of Indio, and we didn't really participate because it states on there that it has to be funded, and we
don't have any money in that fund.
We don't have any money in that fund.
We never put money in. We created the policy, I believe, to comply with. I forget what the requirement was, but we did create the policy, but we've never put any money in the fund.
Yeah, I mean, any city could ask for it, but unfortunately, we just don't fund it. It's a very expensive endeavor because it's not just when the cities get into it, it's not just the amount of undergrounding the initial poles from overhead to underground. If you know, when you get to the homes have all their weather heads up on top of the roof. Now you've got to come back, most likely tear that load center in your house, and replace it to one that'll take a feed from underneath the house. So now you're talking about going in there and tearing up lawns and stuff. And that's what draws a lot of cities off. Like I said, we've done this a couple of times in the city of Indio. But I want to state again, we have not participated in any of those costs. It's all been funded by the city of Indio, particularly in downtown. But I will tell you, the biggest expense wasn't ours taking the lines from overhead to underground. It was the actual conversion of the businesses and customers from an overhead installation to an underground installation. Because just again, imagine your house. If you live in an older house, you're overhead. Now I can imagine if we did all those wires, we're going to come through your yard and whatever. So there is that, but we just don't use it. But I will, Director Hanks and Mr. I'll look into it as far as what that is, but it's not we're not taking an overhead and putting it, replacing it. It's a new circuit, and that's what was proposed. And I'll look into it, sir, and I'll get you some more information.
Motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? Please vote. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 5, quitclaim deed, Campo Verde Solar.
Move to approve.
Second. I'll second it. Is there any discussion on this? Okay, right away is not here. Paul, do you have something to say on this? I think it's something simple. I know that Mr. Cook was here earlier, but then he left.
Nothing in particular. It's just a right-of-way. There was actually an old energy right-of-way that actually existed before IID was an energy company, and it was just clouding the title. Previously, there was another easement that was quitclaimed. This was parallel to it, and it was just discovered as part of the escrow process. So it's not.
Who quitclaimed the other one?
Oh, that was quitclaimed through the IID by the board. I guess it was done in June.
Who was it? Who was the owner, recipient of it?
This Campo Verde Solar was
No,
quitclaimed.
it sounds like when the district, and I don't know anything about this, I'm just reading it, when the district acquired the land, it had an easement in favor of it that we didn't know about. And so they've acquired the land now, and it's subject to that same easement, is what they're saying. And they're asking that we give away that easement through a
We had one other one that came before us, and it got pulled and never
Right.
came back. And this is not it, right?
That one was actually taken care of. And
No,
that
we
was
passed that.
quitclaimed.
We passed the other one. It was on.
Yeah, that was
It didn't have access. It was on pieces of ground that had no access to it. Not in that area.
Okay, just trying to make sure we're talking about the same thing here. There was are you talking about
No, the other one was different, right?
a previous one that wasn't
Yeah.
approved? Yes, that was different.
that was different.
There was a 74-foot quitclaim of an old Fern Canal easement. The one for this quitclaim was a parallel energy easement that at the time was unknown. It was just discovered because it was actually under that previous.
Is there going to be power
Yes.
lines other than IID running across it?
Pardon?
Is there going to be power lines other than IIDs running across it?
There shouldn't be, no.
Well, doesn't First Solar need this piece of property for their solar project?
Yeah, they're going to use it for something, Director Hanks. Could be power lines, could be collector lines, could be solar panels.
They need it for their project.
Yeah, as far as our facilities, though, I thought that's what you meant. They may have whatever facilities running across there.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Please vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go through?
Go
So what
through.
happens now?
It has to wait. Yes, they talked about it in closed session, not doing this because of the crossing. So there you are. James Cook can talk to Director Desert and Director Hanks about it. Okay, that's the end of the meeting. When do we meet again, on the 25th?
Next Tuesday.
Okay, very good.
Closed session tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Oh, tomorrow at 1.